We interview journalist and cinematographer Andy Boreham about his documentary series on Tibetan life in Xizang. Hey everyone, I'm Jason Smith, originally from sunny California, now living in beautiful Beijing. Andy Boreham is a journalist, author, and documentary filmmaker. His latest documentary series, 7 Days in Xizang, is shaking things up with fresh insights into the state of the Tibetan people. And his book, The Wu Mao Handbook, 20 Anti-China Lies Debunked, is likewise transforming insights into the real China. Welcome back to the Bridge to China, Andy.
Nice to see you again, Jason. It feels like it's been ages.
Yeah, I think it has been ages, but we kind of chat online here and there.
Yeah, we're always in touch, but
Oh, we are always in touch. Actually, I'm going to be at CIIE, so maybe we'll run into each other.
I'll be there.
I saw in your documentary, I think the thing that stuck out to me, I mean, obviously it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. The clothing is beautiful. Everything about the people there are beautiful. But you interviewed a freed slave. And I can't even believe that I hadn't thought of that or thought of the reality that those people are still around. So could you tell us a little bit about her story both before and after her liberation?
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting chat, actually. Unfortunately, I had to do it through a translator because she only speaks Tibetan. She doesn't speak Mandarin. And of course, she doesn't speak English. But it was still really interesting. Her name's Pemba. She's 83 this year. And she was born a slave, owned by the Pala family, which was one of Xizang's huge noble families, until she was 8 years old when the PLA came and freed the area in 1951. So before that, she was living in like a little, it's like a pig sty, like a pig pen with her family. And then in the morning, her mother and father would go, her father would go into the fields, her mother would go across the road to the factory and work all day as slaves and serfs for no pay and barely enough to survive on, barely enough sustenance. They were given a ration of tsamba, which is, I don't know if you've tried it, you've been to Xizang. It's like that kind of flowery kind of, it's very weird tasting. They love it, but that's all they had. It's like a high in protein, I think, high in energy, but not much else. That's all they were given to eat. So they would save some supplies, bring them back in the evening to the kids, locked up in the pig pen. And that's where she lived until she was 8 years old. She didn't know anything before that. And then in 1951, like I said, the PLA rocked up and freed everybody from what was going on, the hideous situation for 95% of the Tibetan people. And from then on, she was a free person. And this is something that just so many people don't know about when it comes to Xizang history. So I hope with chatting with her that people who see my film will kind of have an idea what things were really like back then. Her life today is amazing. Her house is amazing. It's just so lovely, bright, and you said the clothing's amazing, the colours are amazing. That's just what her home's like, which you would have seen in the film. And I said to her, because the Pala family were super rich, they had imported Louis Vuitton bags, Mont Blanc pens, and everything like that. They were living it up. But I said to her, I would much rather live in your home today than the Pala family manor. Which she agreed with. So yeah, it was really eye-opening.
Wow. I mean, I hope that more people can learn about that history because it's a history and that in the West, like you mentioned, people really just don't know anything about. I want to talk about the Tibetan language because we often hear in the West that China is erasing minority languages in Xinjiang and in Inner Mongolia and in Xizang as well. So based on your, experience there, were people able to speak Tibetan? Did you see Tibetan being used? Or is it like, oh no, don't speak Tibetan in front of the police or something?
Yeah, I'm sure that's what people would love to find out. But no, it's just like everywhere, Jason, you've seen it. The same as, like you mentioned, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia. Their languages are protected, and the promotion of their languages are protected by law here in China. Not like places like Shanghai, where the majority, they have their own language, but the majority here are Han Chinese. So their language in Shanghai is not protected the same way it is in Xizang, in Xinjiang, in Inner Mongolia. It's everywhere. It's on all of the road signs. There's media, there's radio, there's newspapers. People speak it together. But of course, they also speak Mandarin. Mandarin is the lingua franca, the official language of all of China, and that place is part of China. So, of course, everyone speaks that very well. And so it's kind of like here in Shanghai now, probably a little more than half of the population here are from outside of Shanghai. So you can't assume that anyone you meet on the street can speak Shanghainese. So even if you do speak Shanghainese, you would first greet somebody in Mandarin and then find out, oh, you're Shanghainese, you can switch to the Shanghai language. It's kind of similar there in Xizang, but actually to less of a degree. I think more people would just automatically speak Tibetan when they run into strangers, especially because you can kind of tell the difference between Han Chinese and Tibetan people. But yeah, it's spoken everywhere. I interviewed a woman there who is a local. Her husband is also Tibetan, and I was interested. Do you guys argue in Tibetan? And they do, so it's very prevalent.
Well, you spoke with school children also. Were they being taught the Tibetan language?
Yeah, I went in, checked out some of the Tibetan language classes, which is very interesting. They're all following along. You know, a lot of people say, no, it's just acting. They put it on for you. Firstly, I would love to be that important for them to get a cast of thousands to trick me. But, I was looking very closely because I was thinking I better, make sure I cross my T's and dot my I's. And as the teacher was speaking, he would say, it was a very interactive class. Like, I couldn't understand, but he was like, "Ba-da-da-da-da-da," and they were all like, da-da-da-da, 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 answering the question. So they understand. It's their native language. And I think taking classes in Tibetan language in school helps to ensure that their Tibetan language skills, especially writing, are more academic. Because again, I bring it back to Shanghai. Here in Shanghai, a lot of younger people speak Shanghainese, but there's no written language really for it. You can use the Chinese script, but there's a lot of words that have a different sound and they would like to switch it out, and it's just not supported the way Tibetan language is.
It's surprising me because I knew that Cantonese was another language, but when people in Beijing describe Shanghainese to me, they tell me it's a dialect. So that's inaccurate.
Yeah, I think it's inaccurate. I think it depends how you look at it, because if you look at a unified China, then of course it's a dialect. But if you're a linguist, maybe you'd say it's a separate language. China has, I think, 7 different language trees. One of them is Cantonese, one of them is the Mandarin tree, and of course Shanghainese. It's part of Wuyu, the Wu language, which is a whole separate branch. So for me, I see it as another language, but that's up to debate, and I'm not a linguist.
Well, that's fascinating. I've learned something entirely unexpected today. People are also concerned whether Tibetan Buddhism is able to be practiced. I think that's one of the primary things that I hear. The language is more of a secondary argument. And you did go to monasteries while you were in Tibet. Could you tell us, are they able to practice their religion, or were they all acting for you again?
Wow, they were all acting, of course. Oscar-worthy, I have to say, because it was pretty believable. No, it's such a spiritual place. Everywhere you go there, especially in Lhasa. Lhasa in Tibetan actually means place of the gods. So that goes to show already how spiritual the place is. It's hugely spiritual. You can see open displays of religion, much more than you would see in my home country, New Zealand. It's just everywhere. There are people prostrating on the streets, when they kind of bow down, bow up. It's just, you see it everywhere. I visited some monasteries, like you mentioned, in Lhasa. The Sera Monastery is one of the top monasteries there. It's like a university for Tibetans. I think there's about 500 monks there who are learning how to be monks, Wow. And it's not like a university in the West where you might spend 3, 4, 5 years. It's more like decades. So a lot of them that I chatted with some of them, they've been studying for 3 or 4 decades. It's kind of a lifelong thing. So it's very open. It's not at all, I hate to go back to the boring facts, but religious belief, the freedom of religious belief is also protected by law here in China, and that is evident for everyone to see who visits.
That's really fascinating, because my wife is Buddhist, but she's not Tibetan Buddhist. So there's different varieties of Buddhism in China as well. So their practices are very different from my wife's practices. I think she respects their beliefs, and I think different Buddhist sects respect one another's beliefs, but there's actually quite a variety. There's at least 3 kinds of Buddhism that I'm aware of, and at least 3 kinds of Taoism that I'm aware of that are proliferating in China. So I think obviously you also have the Christians and the mosques, Muslims, and all of that as well. So I think it's a very different place than people imagine. I want to talk about poverty because I think, to my understanding, like Xizang. Well, actually, before we get to that, why Xizang? Why not Tibet? Could we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I looked into this and I mentioned it here in my book. If you haven't got it already, you can grab a copy. There are a number of reasons. A lot of people say, oh, they're trying to erase Tibetan history, Tibetan culture by changing the name to Xizang. But the name Xizang is the name of the area, firstly, of the Xizang Autonomous Region, which was established 50 years ago, or 60 years ago. I should know that. Let's say 60 years ago. I'll have to look that up. It's actually a geographical region. It's the name of a geographical region. What encapsulated Tibet before was a different area that included parts of Sichuan province and other areas. So it's actually technically wrong to call it Tibet today because it encapsulates a whole different geographical area. Also, in 1976, the UN passed a resolution whereby place names would be, especially for China, place names are based on pinyin, not on English names. So Tibet is a name. Now, I haven't looked completely into the history, but it was never called Tibet. That's a name that was kind of thrust onto it
Canton.
by outsiders. Yeah, it's like, so what happens is that kind of ordinance, I think it was, from the UN, insisted that places in China, place names internationally, will be based on the pinyin, so Xizang, Xinjiang. You don't call it something else. And the third reason is to move away from the politicization, because Tibet, that name is so heavily politicized. I mean, you ask anyone what they think of when you say the word Tibet, and they'll probably say, free Tibet, So that has been kind of dictated by Western forces, including the British who invaded the area a number of times. So it's kind of also a move away from the politicization and the grasp they have on the politics of that place with that name. So very interesting.
I haven't been to the part of where the Tibetan people live in Sichuan, but I went to a village called Shangri-La. So I think it's, some derivation of Shangri-La in Yunnan, and there was a Tibetan village there. It's absolutely beautiful. And I also found Tibetan villages and Tibetan people living in Qinghai. So yeah, it doesn't seem like when we're talking about Xizang, we're also talking about just a specific, bordered area, and like it doesn't overlap with the Western conception of the entire region as well.
Exactly.
Back to poverty. Obviously, after the earthquake a couple of years ago, there was all of these isolated villages that needed help, and it was difficult to get help to them. Could you talk a little bit about, the remoteness of places or the limitation on transportation resources? How have you seen development and modernity coming to the Xizang? Are people's lives in fact getting better?
Yeah, I think so. Of course, I only visited Lhasa and a place called Rikadze, which is the second largest city. But when we headed there, there's a new highway that's opened up between the two that makes the journey a lot quicker than it was before. And as you know, if you improve infrastructure, especially transportation, you really bring development in a whole raft of areas. One of the ways that people are helping out, especially different Chinese people in Xizang, is through kind of a sister city agreement. So cities on the east coast of China, which are a lot better off financially, for example, Shanghai, have kind of a city in Xizang that they're paired up with that they help out. So for Shanghai, the city is Rikadze, where I went to. So there's a lot of support offered. One of my bosses actually has just moved to Rikadze for a 3-year secondment to help them setting up tourism there and kind of targeting foreigners and making foreigners come and visit, which I think there's no limit of foreigners that want to visit. But yeah, that's one of the ways they're actually moving forward and pulling the place out of poverty. I think also, if you look back in the day, Xizang has improved so much ever since 1951 or 1959. Before, the life expectancy was just 35 years, and now it's 72 years. So it's like more than double. Yeah, my math's really bad. It's more than double better, including people's incomes are rising exponentially. And I think a lot of that is to do with tourism. So, I think it's definitely, getting better. And I mean, I can't speak too much on before because this is my first time, but I think what I saw was pretty amazing.
Can we talk? You mentioned foreigners visiting. If they're trying to increase traffic of tourists, how are foreigners able to get access to traveling to Xizang?
Well, actually, it's still a little bit of a pain. They have to get a special permit. And I think one of the main reasons behind that is the fact that the elevation is so high. It's really dangerous. You need oxygen with you everywhere. They're really not pushing for foreigners to do independent travel, especially because most foreigners can't speak Mandarin, for one, and they definitely can't speak Tibetan. So if they ran into any kind of problems, it might be very dangerous. With the tour guides, they carry the proper, first aid equipment, oxygen. There's tanks everywhere you go. Even in your hotel. In your hotel room, there's an oxygen tank. If your oxygen's going down, you can test your blood oxygen level. So it's very dangerous if you run into a problem with high altitude sickness. In fact, when we went there, we were urged not to fly there directly because it's kind of too fast. You can't acclimatize. So we went to Xining. Was it Xining? Qinghai. Oh, I forget now all these names. We took the train in from another province nearby, which allowed us to slowly kind of climb to the 5,000 or so meter level, which your body's just not used to. And it's so serious that actually on the first day or the first 2 days, they recommend you don't have a shower even, because if you cool yourself down and then your body can't warm up again, it can be very dangerous. Wow. You can easily catch the flu or things like that. So one of the main problems still is that high elevation. So I think maybe if they could work on getting some more tourism facilities in place so that people don't need a pass. I don't know, because that's one of the final, things that the anti-China folk cling to about Xizang is they say, oh, we're not allowed there. We can't travel there freely. So they're hiding something. It's not that at all. It's to do with safety. But maybe there could be a way to get around it. I'm not sure. I'm sure they're working on it.
I think, well, the strategy that I'm thinking of is my wife is Chinese and I'm obviously American, so we want to go there because I went there 2 years ago, and my wife wants to go back, and obviously she can go back tomorrow. But the easy way to do it is like you said, tourist companies. So if you want to go, you call up a tourist company, say, I want to go next week or a month from now, and they can get the permits for you as long as you go with the tour group. And so that enables people to go. But the altitude thing is very serious. When we did fly in directly into Lhasa from Beijing. And I was okay because I had been preparing. I was taking this medicine. I'm not endorsing this medicine. It's a kind of a tea or a herbal medicine, and I was taking it for like a week every day. 2 pills in the morning, 2 pills in the afternoon, 2 pills in the evening, and the entire time I was there. And I brought ibuprofen in case I got a headache. And I did altitude training near Beijing the week before at 1,000 meters. But I was fine. But one of my coworkers who didn't really prepare, she got really sick. And within like 48 hours, she was hospitalized and flown out on the first flight they could get her on. So it is actually extremely dangerous. And, if someone has a heart problem, high blood pressure, that could result in a death. So it is very serious. In the documentary, you talk about youth, their aspirations, and what they want out of education or work. What did you learn about young people in Xizang? How do they envision their future?
Well, I did. I was lucky to visit the Lhasa Middle School and chat with some teenagers there. It was an awesome insight. Unfortunately, the film couldn't be that long, so I had to cut out most of the conversations. But we met with, I think, 4 young people in the school and had a chat. We asked them a lot of questions that weren't in the final film, but I think 3 out of the 4 want to work in media. And I was trying to push them, keep learning English. You can tell the Xizang stories to the world, the real Xizang. And they thought that was a pretty cool idea. So they're really interested in talking about their home. And also one of the students wants to be in the Navy, in the PLA Navy, which I thought was really awesome. And we chatted about that in the daytime. Then I went to his home afterwards for dinner with his father. And I thought, I just figured he'd told his parents already that was his aspiration. And then his dad was kind of listening behind as we were filming. And he was like, yeah, no, I want to be in the PLA Navy. I'm going to, try and get into a PLA university. And his dad was like, and he wasn't very happy because his son's going to leave. I mean, one of the main reasons he wanted to join the Navy is because he's in Xizang, right? He's grown up there, he hasn't left, which is landlocked. He's never seen the ocean before. So he wants to kind of get out, and he's very proud of his country. He wants to defend his country on the high seas. So they have high aspirations. And also I asked them, have you guys heard about some of the Western media reports about your hometown, some of the lies? And a couple of them were like, oh, no, I haven't. And I kind of felt like, I'm not going to tell them. That's not really fair. So the other two were like, yeah, I have. And one of them said, it actually makes them quite angry, which I was quite surprised about, because normally Chinese people, I don't know if you found this, but they're quite, they try to play things down. They don't let things get to them. But he was actually quite angry about it. And I felt, rightly so. I said to him, if I was you, I'd be furious. So, yeah, they've got their whole life ahead of them. They're very proud of their place, of Xizang. And it was really cool talking to them.
Going back to the previous question, I'm curious about how long you were there and what did you do for altitude preparedness? And did you or anyone on your crew get sick or feel sick?
We were all fine. Beforehand, we found a medicine that's kind of like a little bottle that you stab a straw in. And it tastes disgusting. It tastes like cough medicine. And we had to take it in the morning and evening. No, I think 3 times a day for a week before. And then, of course, like I said, we took the train, which was slowly acclimatizing. One of my colleagues got a bit sick on the way while we were still in the train. It's, I think, a 22-hour train journey. And as we were kind of, coasting into Xizang, it was already quite high. And she had a headache and felt a bit off. But by the time we got there, everyone was fine. And then we all tested our blood oxygen level in the hotel room. And mine was like 94, 95%, which is really high. So I was doing well. And I asked some locals there. They said theirs is never that high. It's normally like 80 something. So I think even for the locals, they're not fully acclimatized. They're not fully used to it. But I did find shortness of breath would be quite easy. Like if you suddenly ran up some stairs or something, you'd be like, you kind of have to stop and take a deep breath. But apart from that, yeah, we were totally fine. We were there 7 days, 7 days in Xizang.
Right, exactly. The title of the documentary. For people who are looking for it online, where can they find it?
They can find it on my YouTube, which is Reports on China. I think, just go to YouTube and search Reports on China. It's posted as the main video. It was 3 parts, but we, since all 3 parts came out separately, I've put it together and released it as one whole as well. So it's there.
That's wonderful. I think people should watch your content because it's firsthand experiences of what's actually going on there now. With respect to the Tibetan community that lives abroad, most of them have left 3 generations ago. And so their experience or understanding of what's going on in Xizang may not be up to date or accurate if they haven't taken the time to travel back and see what's actually going on today. Obviously, when you make a documentary and when you're going with the filming crew, you have a lot of planning that goes into your trip, the kinds of things you're wanting to see, the kinds of people you want to interview, the kinds of clips you want to get out of it. But obviously, you're also going to encounter things that you didn't expect. So what kind of things did you observe, people, places, things, ideas that took you off guard or surprised you?
One of the main ones was definitely around the Barkhor Street, which is it's like a circular street where people prostrate. And in the middle is Jokhang Temple, which is like one of the famous must-visit places. And of course, before I went to Xizang and did all my research, like you said, you do have to kind of plan what you want to see, where you want to go, who you want to talk to. My planning was all Buddhism, Buddhism, Buddhism. And then when we were going around Jokhang Temple and Barkhor Street, we came across the Muslim quarter. And I was like, what? The Muslim quarter? There's a Muslim quarter here? Because I've been, we're all affected by, the Western representations of Tibet and how it is and which is how it's not. And I just never imagined that there'd be other religions flourishing there that weren't anything to do with Buddhism. So there's a big mosque there that was built decades ago. There's all these shops all around, people preparing food according to the Muslim practices. It's just amazing. So they're all living together, very close to each other, in harmony. It sounds cliched. It sounds absolutely cliched. But you just have to go there to see it for yourself, I think. I'm sure if we have more time, because 7 days is not enough. It would be really cool to just walk around more and get more inspiration. Unfortunately, when you're heading there on your boss's dime and you have a budget and you have a set time, you don't have a lot of time to kind of discover things. Actually, for me, when I'm doing a documentary, I'd much rather just go there. Just have an idea in my head kind of what I'm supposed to see, but be open to changing. And unfortunately, when you're using other people's money and other people's time and resources, you can't always do that. But we were able to, get in a part about the Muslim quarter, which was really interesting. I would rather just go there and spend a few days and just find the story. But yeah, that was one example.
Yeah, I was walking around Barcourt Street, and I also saw that, and I was all equally surprised by that. And one other thing, which may not surprise other people, but on the when you're coming out on the side, because everyone circles the same way, when you're coming out towards the front and you're coming back around to the front of the temple, there's a Pizza Hut, and
a KFC.
Yeah, it was really surprising. I did not expect that. I thought, okay, this is holy. This is a sanctuary. This is about Tibetan Buddhism, and this is going to be and then it's like Pizza Hut. And it's like, okay, I guess it's not that serious.
Yeah, there's a Pizza Hut, there's a KFC, and there's a Pop Mart in between. And actually, and this kind of goes to show how there's kind of different cultural, kind of feeling between Shanghai, for example, and Xizang. A lot of people went to that Pop Mart to get Labubu dolls or Labubu toys, because people in Xizang didn't really care about it that much, so they were still available, which was interesting.
Based on the ideas that the West has, and I think you've already covered this to some extent, but I think we need to hash it out. We really need to the Western folks to understand this. What do you think that your documentary is adding to the conversation about Tibet, Xizang, that maybe audience have misunderstood or been misinformed about before?
I think probably the whole thing, to be honest, because Western propaganda, and I have to call it propaganda, it sounds political, but it really is so pervasive. Like, of course, even we are victims of it. Like, this was my first time visiting Xizang, and I was shocked at how, for example, Lhasa, the capital, how many cars there are, different shops, like you said, Pizza Hut, KFC. We shouldn't be shocked about Pizza Hut and KFC being in Lhasa, but we were, because we've been kind of conditioned to believe that it's kind of this like mystical, magical utopia that, is cut off from the world and completely different and blah, blah, blah. There's so much that we get wrong. So I think in my film, I mainly focus on the ones we've already talked about, which is the language and religion, and then the past and present, because a lot of people don't know, maybe that's a big one, that before liberation, 95% of the population were slaves, living in absolutely hideous conditions. That is something a lot of people don't know about. The 5% that ran the place, it was like a feudal kind of, what's that word, where it's run by a religion? Anyway, I forgot the word. There's a term, you know it. We'll figure it out later. Theocracy. A feudal theocracy that was just terrifying. Most people were living in absolute poverty. They didn't have their own time. They didn't have their own freedom. They couldn't even get married without the okay from their owners. And even then, the owners would take dibs on their babies. So if you had a boy, the boy would go to either the mother or the father's slave owners. And if you had a girl, it would go to the other side. It was all panned out. So I think a lot of people, that might be the main one, don't know that hideous history, that Xizang, or Tibet if you want to call it that, before was not a utopia. It was, in fact, the complete opposite. And I think they'll find out all about that if they watch my film, and I hope they do.
Yeah, I've looked at a lot of the old pictures that are in black and white by a lot of photographers, Western and Chinese and locals. And, one of the things that really surprised me is that I don't know if this was done for religious purposes or as a punishment, but there's a great deal of dismemberment where people's hands were chopped off, or people were living in chains, or people were, in fact, and I think this was religious, skinned. And that, it's really not something Western people understand about the way that the society existed before. Basically, the central government of China said, enough is enough. This is not going to happen in our country.
Yeah, people had their limbs cut off if they didn't pay enough taxes, or, if they didn't do this or do that, or they left without telling people, or telling their owner or whatever, they would have, their punishment was limbs being cut off, arms being cut off, legs being cut off, like you said, living in chains. It was just disgusting, really, I have to say. And then there were, like you said, human skin. People were absolutely completely skinned. They made tools and ornaments out of bones and human skin. There was a human skin drum in the Xizang Museum, which is absolutely horrifying. People really need to go there to see it for themselves, I think. It's something you're not going to really believe or feel until you go and see, especially the Xizang Museum.
So after making the documentary, what are your reflections on modernization, education, government policy? How do they intertwine with traditional culture or modern culture? And one thing I'm just going to notice myself is a little bit off point, but I noticed that a lot of people wear cowboy hats in downtown Lhasa, in the middle of the city. There's a few skyscrapers, and then there's like cowboy hats, and I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the cowboy hat thing comes from, if it's local or what, but you're right, they're very popular there. People are selling them all over the place, and it kind of looks like we're about to join the rodeo or something. But in terms of culture, I think people are really pushing, with the government's assistance, pushing to keep alive Xizang culture and history. Language, language is a part of culture, a huge part. There's also a massive performance. I was going to say a play, but it's not a play. It's like a huge musical with a cast of hundreds there about the history of Xizang and kind of how they came together with Beijing, with whoever was I'm so bad, I've forgotten all the details, but they kind of had a marriage of convenience with someone related to a princess from Beijing, who then moved to Lhasa to kind of pull the two areas together. And that's when they really embarked on more trade and cultural exchanges together. That is now a cultural heritage, that play itself. And if you head to Lhasa, you have to go and see that. It's on, I think, every evening. Maybe they have one night off a week. It's absolutely amazing. So, and also in the Lhasa Middle School, we saw a class where they're learning and practicing traditional Xizang music, which was really awesome as well. So I think it's alive and well. They're very much, like I mentioned before, about Labubu. They have their own things they enjoy. It's far away from everywhere else in China. So it's kind of unique. And I think they're prospering. I think they're really flourishing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some of the new solar installations that they're building there, because it's not only going to power all of Xizang, but some of that power will be exported to areas around Xizang as well. Let's talk about your book. So,
okay.
The Wu Handbook, 20 Anti-China Lies Debunked, my question is this. Obviously, there's a lot more lies about China.
Yes.
Are there more books coming?
Yeah, there will be. I'm definitely going to be working on that. I haven't started yet because it does take a lot of work. I wish it was just a case of finding, whatever some stupid myths are that people say and then saying, no, that's not true because I've seen this. But I try to back it up with references and kind of stats and facts and figures, which you're really good at. Maybe I should get you on board next time to help me out with some facts and figures. I love your facts and figures all over Twitter, or X as they call it. But yeah, there's definitely going to be a new book, hopefully more than one, because I think there's just so much more to say. But it does take time and it takes a lot of energy. So I haven't started on it yet. But I think people are really enjoying part one. This one has 20, like you said, 20 anti-China lies that are debunked. And in fact, a lot of the topics we've talked about today are in here, like the freedom of religion in China, and also issues about Xizang, which is really cool. So people can find out more about that. Also, it's very easy to read, I think, which is one of the things I love about it, because there's so much content out there that's kind of academic. And there are people who enjoy that, but I think a lot of people don't. They kind of start to read it and they're like, I don't get it, I'll read it again. This is very, very plain English, and you can consume the chapters really quickly, really easily. So it's for everybody, and I hope they'll grab a copy, of course.
Well, my wife loved your book, actually. She
Oh,
doesn't
really?
read books very much, especially English books, but she loved your book because it's full of games and puzzles. And
Oh, yeah.
the actually, like, I don't remember what they're called, the maze inside the book.
Yes.
Like, she's like, oh, how long do you think it'll take me to do this maze? And I said 3 minutes, and she finished in like 30
2
seconds.
seconds.
And she's like, ha
Yeah,
ha
yeah, yeah.
ha, or whatever. You know? So like we went back and forth on it. It was a really fun. It's got a lot of pictures, a lot of illustrations, a lot of fun, a lot of games. It's like an
Yeah.
adventure. It's like an adventure. So I think
Yeah, I tried to do that because I didn't want it to be just wall to wall text. So, like you said, there's a lot of pictures, like illustrations. I won't give it all away, but there's a lot of illustrations, and like you said, there's games. I think there's about 4 or 5 different games and puzzles in here as well that kind of tests your knowledge as you're going along, like how well you're doing. And there's a quiz in there that you may not know all the answers to until you've read the whole book, so that's fun as well. That'll be one of the challenges making book number 2 is like, what other games are there? I need to do something new.
I had a coworker also, and she is not. We're constantly interviewing people, and I'm constantly buying people's books or getting people's books so I can interview them and make it relevant. And my producer never reads any of them because they're wall to wall. I don't know, 80,000 words or whatever.
Oh, there are a
She
lot,
got
yeah.
your book and she loved it. And a couple of days later, she's like, "I read his book. It's amazing. Everyone should read this book." Like,
That's awesome.
she's like, "What are the plans for it proliferating?" And I was like, "Whoa, slow down. I don't know." How is it going with the book? I mean, in terms of feedback from people, where is it available? Where can people find your book?
Unfortunately, it's only available on Amazon, which a lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't support Amazon, but it's hard in terms of logistics to try to get it sent all around the world. So people can get it on Amazon. They can go to their local Amazon page if they want to. It's also available as an ebook for people to read it. Yeah, to read it on Kindle, which I didn't do in the beginning because I just like holding something, you know what I mean? Like, especially with the puzzles and stuff. But people were like, I'm not buying it till you do a Kindle. So I did a Kindle. But it's doing pretty well. We're in talks to release a version in China. It'll be a bilingual version of this book. But it'll be a little bit different because it's kind of like the way this book is aimed is it's really for Westerners. Chinese people might read it and be like, yeah, I know that. I already know that, you know what I mean? So we're going to flip it around and make it more like, look at these stupid things that Westerners believe about China, kind of change the angle a little bit.
Yeah.
So that should be fun, but that'll be really cool to release it in China. But yeah, Amazon is where it is now. I've had some really amazing feedback. And in the beginning, there were a few people trying to give negative reviews on Amazon. They click like 1 star. But you can see very clearly that it's not a verified buyer. But now, kind of, they've been outswamped by the real reviews, which is really, really heartening for me. I love reading all the comments, and people seem to really enjoy it, especially because it's so easy to read, I think.
How did you choose these particular 20 lies about China?
I kind of went through, I just smashed them all out on paper. I had about 40 or 50 that I had put down. I also put out a post on Twitter, I think, a couple of years ago asking, what are some of the big lies you want to know about? But then in the end, how I chose them, the ones to use in this book, is really the ones I could easily and clearly debunk. For example, in here, there's a chapter about they're all each chapter is like lie number 1, not lie number 2, lie number 3. And there's a lie in here that says Chinese people hate the government. And there's a lot of foreign surveys, really large surveys, that show that, a massive number of Chinese people trust their government much more than Western countries. So that is really, it's a gold mine for a book like this. So it was kind of in the end deciding which ones can I debunk truthfully and kind of convincingly and clearly, and using as many Western sources as possible. That was one of them. A lot of the sources in here are Chinese because I've kind of started feeling like, a lot of people do books on China and they say, well, you can trust, pro-China people, they say, you can trust my book because I use all Western sources. But for me, I'm kind of like, stuff that. No, I'm going to use Chinese sources as well. It's coming from the horse's mouth. So yeah, it's a mix of how easy they were to kind of debunk. and also how interesting they were. And also, you might not have noticed this, but I kind of have some quite heavy chapters, and then in the middle there's much more light chapters. So some might be 8 pages, a lot to kind of soak in, and then the next one will be 2 pages. So it's like a tapestry of, hard and easy kind of level.
One thing I really liked your book. I also read the whole thing, but one of the chapters that really stood out to me, and it's important to me, is the one on the social credit score. And when people DM me all the time, I get 30 new DMs a day on my Twitter account.
Yeah.
And I answer about 5 or 6 of them because I have some time. And when people ask me, oh, where can I learn more about social credit score? I just say, buy Andy's book and I send them the link because the explanation in the book is very concise and very accurate.
Yes.
And it debunks the concept of what this is really well, because there are in fact kind of credit scores in China, and I think people can say, "Oh, what you're saying is not true," because there is a credit score in China, but it's nothing like what the West imagines. And I think your chapter really helps people understand that really well.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you should point that one out, because I was kind of planning in the beginning with the social credit score one to just have 1 page and 1 sentence that just says, there is no social credit score in China. The end. It would be kind of funny, but then I was like, I'll kind of flesh it out a little bit. But yeah, it's very short. This is it. 1 page of text and this image here. And as you mentioned, there are credit scores, not social credit scores. There are credit scores in China like there are everywhere else. You can't get a loan or get an HP without having a credit score. They want to see how well you pay your bills, blah, blah, blah. Those exist in China, which is not a shock at all. But the social credit score system where they say, they're watching your chats, and if you talk about blah, blah, blah too often, you'll lose points. If you play games late at night, you'll lose points. It's absolutely CRAP. So that chapter was very short.
Some of the ridiculous statements I hear online, and I don't know if this is bots or what, or real people who actually think this, but they're like, oh, if you went jaywalking or something, then like when you get home, your door will be locked. What? I'm sorry. Wow. People need to visit China. I mean, because the concepts of what's going on in China are nothing like reality. I do want to point out, because I think it's fascinating, I have personal firsthand experience. I know a person, I'm not going to say anything about them to make them identifiable, and their family owes something like 30 million RMB to creditors and to other companies, and they went bankrupt. And so what happened to them had nothing to do with any social credit score. This was not done by a system or an AI or on their phone or anything like that. They stood before a judge. And that judge said, because you haven't paid all these bills and you're unable to pay them, until you pay them, you are not allowed to take high-speed rail, stay in first-class hotels, stay in take first. And your visa and your passports are removed because we don't want you running away from your bankruptcy. So in this case, they stood in front of a judge to have some of their freedom of movement limited a little bit, but it had nothing to do with any kind of app or any kind of the amount of money they owe. It's not thousands of dollars or RMB.
Millions.
It's millions. I mean, it's basically they have committed a kind of fraud and they're being held to account. I think that's actually what would happen to you in the United States. If you committed fraud in the United States, you would probably not be able to leave the state maybe, or you wouldn't be able to do certain things. It's basically what's going on in China doesn't seem that dissimilar to me than what goes on in pretty much any other country.
Well, I feel like even if it is dissimilar, I think it's a good thing. Like in New Zealand, there's so many people who, they run a terrible business and they file for bankruptcy and they're like, oh, well, I just won't pay them, and then I'll go and start another company. They have no kind of limits on their life, the ease of their life. So I feel like in New Zealand, if they did some of those things, like said, okay, you owe them this money, you file for bankruptcy, whatever, but you can't get a driver's license, you can't fly a plane, that would be amazing. If people had real world consequences for treating people like crap, I think it would be a great thing. So, and I have heard of that in China where people, they go before a judge, they owe money, or it's usually to do with owing money, and then they can't take the high-speed train. In China, if you can't take the high-speed train, that's a huge thing. Like you can't head home very easily for New Year and things like that. So it's a real-world kind of inconvenience that might make you think twice. So I think even if China is harsher in that aspect, and it not necessarily is, I think that would even be a good thing. So I think do that, really.
from the expert that that literally wrote the book about lies about China, what are one or two pet peeve lies about China that drive you insane?
I would have to say everything. One of the ones would be to do with myself. I'm going to be selfish here. That people think because I work in media in China that everything I say and do is told to me by the government or some party watcher or something like that. Like, it's so insulting. Like, actually, I have a brain. I know what I'm doing. And for people to kind of make out that I'm an automaton is kind of really freaking rude. So that annoys me. What else? There's so many. Like, I think I probably told you last time, people still feel like China is kind of second class. Like, China is so amazing in so many aspects compared to the rest of the world, but people still have this idea in their head, and it's fed by Western media, that somehow China isn't as good in all aspects. So when I got my master's degree at Fudan, I'm pretty sure I told you this last time, Fudan is one of the top universities in the world, let alone China. And when I graduated, I said to one of my good New Zealand friends, oh my God, I can't believe I have a master's. And he goes, it's only a Chinese master's though. And I was like, oh my gosh. So wow. I think a lot of people still have these kind of feelings about China, that it's kind of less than. And also another one, okay, I'll add one more. It's that no one believes any data coming out of China because they say, well, that's from the Chinese government, so you can't trust them. It's like every country's data, not all of it, but a lot of it comes from, the people who have the data. But for some reason, they seriously undermine and don't trust Chinese data on anything. I think that needs to change. There's probably so much more. I would say nearly everything people understand about China annoys me.
I mean, I would say even people who love China sometimes have inaccurate ideas about. People need to spend time in China or live in China to understand China. One of the things that drives me crazy is experts, even experts that I like and respect sometimes, have not been in China long enough to really understand China in the way that, I think that, in my opinion, that they should. I don't think you should be able to teach at a university in another country about China if you didn't get at least one of your degrees from a Chinese university. You usually get 3 degrees: bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD. If you got all of those at Stanford and Princeton, respect to those universities, that person's not qualified to be teaching about China. In my opinion, maybe I'm just being too insistent. When you look forward to producing other documents, would this be are other books? Would this be volume 1? Would there be a bunch of them?
Yes. Yeah, so as you can see on the side, and it only has it on the side, it says volume 1.
So there'll be multiple volumes. I'm looking forward to that. I've debated this with my producer because she was speculating. Obviously, that's you. Who are these two folks? Who are these guys?
Well, the other two, I was kind of like, who can they be? And then I thought, I'm a Westerner, so it kind of needs to be representative. It doesn't have to be, but I thought I'm white, and that's kind of pushing it to have me on the cover. So the guy in the middle needs to be Asian. He's Chinese. And this is actually meant to be a black woman. I thought we needed gender diversity as well. So I just said to the designer, I was like, make the guy in the middle a handsome Chinese guy, and the guy on the left a pretty black woman. She could be from anywhere. He could be from anywhere, but I assume he's Chinese. And the other one is me. But I don't think that image will be on the cover next time. Or maybe it will. Maybe we'll just do a different background colour. I'm not sure. Haven't got that far.
We're surprised. Another thing that surprises me about this cover is people don't realize how insanely tall you are. And somehow the gentleman in the middle is taller than you. He must be a giant.
Has to
be. Yeah.
He's 6'5".
Yeah, seriously. So as a journalist in Shanghai, what kind of things do you get to cover throughout the year, or what kind of reporting do you get to do? And have you completely shifted from doing your column?
Yeah, I don't do my column anymore. I used to do a column in Shanghai Daily, but now things are changing so rapidly with traditional media. So, I mean, you'll still have China Daily, which is seen around the world. It's very important, very influential newspaper. But in terms of Shanghai Daily, which they call 地方媒体, like a place media, it's just Shanghai, it's not China. It's not that important. And so Shanghai Daily, over the past few years, kind of switched more towards like a kind of magazine style, entertainment style, like sport, food, art, theatre, what's happening. It's not really political. So when I started doing reports on China about 3 years ago, I stopped doing my weekly column, which was really good, and I'm not going to have to do it again. But it's kind of moving away from all of that. So now Shanghai Daily, even though it's called Shanghai Daily, has become 3 days a week, only 3 days a week. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. But in terms of what I cover, I try to steer away from very official things. I think it's a little boring. I don't know how to explain. For example, this week, I hope my boss isn't watching, there's a conference on in Shanghai called the World China Studies Forum or something like that. And they were like, do you want to go? I was like, no, I don't. Because I feel like kind of it's too hard to smash something into, how do I put it? It's like the stories I cover are very relevant in terms of news. So, recently I did a video on Trump saying he's going to add another 100% tariff. Well, if you go to a forum, for my show, Reports on China, and I interview a professor that's visiting, talking about China studies, I just don't think my viewers are interested in it. So there's a kind of struggle, not a struggle because I always win, but my bosses are always like, can you go cover this? And I usually say no. So yeah, I tend to follow the news and that's about it. In terms of the future though, I think I'd like to maybe try to do something that's a little more casual. And I started doing that recently with a new kind of sit-down talk show. I did the first episode with Kao Jia, which was awesome. So I want to try and do a bit more of that, just sitting and chatting with interesting people. But yeah, try to diversify a little bit. But yeah, Shanghai, it's not in the middle of things like you are in Beijing. So if I was in Beijing and I could go to Lianghui, I would definitely head along. That would be awesome. But I just feel like Shanghai is Shanghai, so it's different.
Well, I mean, it's the financial hub of China.
Which I'm not interested in. Yeah.
Well, are you going to CII this year?
Yeah, I go every year. I've been every single year. So I'll be there again this year, probably on the last few days, maybe the 7th, 8th or 9th. So I'll definitely see you in the media center. That media center is awesome.
I'm only going to go for the first days, so I might not be able to see you there. Yeah, well, I'm going for the first 2 days, I think, because I just want to get there, do my job, and go. In terms of reports on China, because you do a lot of content, it's very relevant. How do you choose? Because there's so many things being discussed about China that are trending, especially this last year. It seems like it's China everywhere, all over the world. Everyone's noticing the rise of China. It's something people can't get away from. How do you choose which kind of content to address?
I tend to go for things that are quite controversial. Like I'm still a product of the West, so kind of
sensational.
We love a bit of drama. Yeah, some conflict. Trump lost. Ha ha ha. He's being shown. Blah blah. Look what they're doing. Blah blah blah. I tend to go for that kind of thing. People tend to enjoy it. I would love to cover other stuff that's more important. For example, my film in Xizang, which I think is really important. It took a lot of time and a lot of effort to make. People just don't watch it to the same level that they watch that kind of more dramatic, more kind of controversial, or, if it bleeds, it leads, with no blood. They love that kind of thing. So that's what I tend to aim for. Especially if China's on the upper hand. For example, today I did a video about the new trade data that's come out, which is showing that China is doing the best in international in exports than it has in 6 months, and that's despite all the massive tariffs from Trump. So they're moving away. Obviously, China's diversifying and doing well despite all that crap. So this is the kind of content my viewers really love. So that's kind of what I look out for. But you're probably the same. X is a great place to look for things to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever everyone is fighting about seems to be where
exactly.
it be. Obviously, as we both know, as everyone knows, if you come to China, even for a week, obviously it would be better if you spent more time here. You're going to learn a lot about China that you simply cannot learn in the West. But for most people in America, at least in my country, most people, 90% of people, maybe more, can't afford to travel, especially outside of North America. And in the case of my people, so coming to China is really out because, they're surviving paycheck to paycheck, most people in the United States. I don't know how it is in New Zealand. But if
Same.
people, yeah, if people outside of China want to learn more about China and they can't physically come here, what is the best way to learn about China in your opinion?
I was going to say local news, but then I think actually because of the free visa policy, there are so many YouTubers coming here. I think people would be, it would be really good to just watch YouTubers' content of people visiting China. You could even look for people visiting from your own country. Like I'm sure every country has YouTubers that are visiting China recently and sharing their experiences here. That's going to be the realest. Apart from visiting yourself, I think that's probably going to be the realest you're going to get. Because news, even news coming from China, it's news, it's not going to tell the whole story or kind of as much of a human story. So yeah, I think I'd go on YouTube and I would just type China and watch those travel vlogs. I think that's probably second best, a distant second best to coming yourself.
I just wanted to thank you so much for your time. It's wonderful having you back on the show. And people can get the book on Amazon. It is called The Wumao Handbook. You can find this on Amazon. Get a copy. I would prefer. I think you should get a physical copy because of the games. But if all you can do is
Come
ebook,
on, yes.
yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Andy Boreham.
Thank you for having me. See you next time.